Welcome or welcome back. This is part 2 of the Specimen Catalogue Envelope Journal. In part 1, I showed you how I created the journal base and decorated the front cover. So if you haven't watched that, be sure to do so. Today we will be doing the interior of the journal, which is decorating the inner pages and adding the signature. And so let's jump right in. Actually, before we do, I just wanted to say that I ended up changing a couple of things on my front cover. Firstly, I added some moss in and around my page, giving it that very foresty feel. I also placed some moss inside the tube, under it, as well as on top by the lid. And the only other addition was a specimen slide in the front pocket there that I thought added a nice touch. This part isn't much of a tutorial, it's just a watch me create sort of thing since there isn't much to explain. So grab a cup of coffee or a snack, and if you pick up any ideas along the way, nothing like it. Since this slide is going into a pocket and doesn't have a backing, I didn't want to add any brads to the corner punch holes, so I'm just covering them up with some washi tape. This piece that I'm adding to the back of the cluster is the same green craft stock that I used on the cover, except this time I've gone ahead and scuffed it up and sanded it down a little bit. I love how the color of the craft stock comes through, and with that green it looks really good. I wish I had done this to the pieces on the front cover as well, but all I'm doing here is just gluing those two pieces together and attaching that to the tag with an eyelet. if you don't already know about the Distress Microglaze, I'd be happy to tell you. This stuff is so good for any piece of paper that is just lackluster. The glaze is in balm consistency, and I use a little finger dauber to apply it to my paper, and it just brings out the colors of whatever you put some down on, and it is just magic in a bottle. So if you feel like there's a piece of ephemera or a fussy cut that is just lacking saturation or just isn't standing out enough, use this stuff on it and you will see the difference instantly. The microglaze is actually a sealer, so you could just definitely use it to finish off a project with a coat on top if you want to seal it. So now I'm attaching that cluster to the tag here, and when attaching your piece to your tags with an eyelet, if you would like that piece to move around and rotate just like with the optical lens on the other tag, just make sure that when you're setting your eyelet, you don't punch all the way down, just enough so that the back of the eyelet is pressed into the tag, but just not all the way or not too tight. I hope that makes sense. Here I'm just collecting a bunch of labels and other bits and bobs together and decorating my pocket. I have sped up these parts because I take a really long time to make up my mind on things, and I don't want y'all to have to sit through every time I'm overthinking each piece and placement. I've also kept in mind not to speed things up too much because I know some of y'all don't like that very much. So just enough to where y'all can still keep up with me, but not to where it sends y'all spiraling into dizziness. So here I'm using this method that I call dry stamping, and it's really fun when using it with embossing powder. I'm using an ink pad that has almost dried out, and I haven't gotten to refilling it yet. So when the ink pad is semi-dried out, I place my stamp into it, allowing the stamp to pick up whatever ink is on the surface, and you get a really thin dry layer of ink on your stamp basically. And by the time you've stamped down onto your paper, half of that ink has already dried up. Whatever ink is still wet is what the embossing powder sticks onto, and that's how you get this grungy effect where you have bits of the stamp that have the embossing and the other bits that are just in ink. I personally love this effect. I just happened on it by pure accident when I tried stamping and embossing using a dry ink pad this one time. And as Bob Ross famously said, they're just happy accidents, and I love them. Since I added hints of gold to the inside, I decided to add just a touch of gold to the cover as well. I'm using the Art Alchemy wax for this, and I'm just using my fingertip to apply it to the edges and other parts of the cover where I think it would stand out. And like I mentioned before, there's really not much for me to explain here, so you guys can just sit back, relax, continue sipping your coffee, and watch me create. And finally, now onto the signature. I've decided that I want to use this as an art journal, so the wisest idea would have my pages be watercolor cardstock. I have one watercolor cardstock sheet and two handmade cotton watercolor papers, and I'm just going to measure those down to size and cut them up to fit inside the journal. The way that I'm adding my pages to my journal is using this clear elastic string. I want to be able to take my pages out in case I want to make a background using, let's say, distress sprays, and I don't want my journal to get wet. So this would be the most ideal way of adding my pages to my journal, and all I'm doing is wrapping that string around my pages and journal cover and tying a couple of knots. It literally doesn't get any more simpler than this, you guys. And well, that brings us to the end of part 2. I hope you guys made it this far into the video. If you did, shoot me a comment and let me know. I hope you all enjoyed, and that's it for me. I'll see you guys on the next one. Stay crafty!